Okay, just a little addition before I start the main part of the tutorial. I just want to give a warning that this process did involve a lot of revision, so hopefully that won't make it too hard to follow, but it does just kind of show in an open way that no matter how long you've been drawing, revision is always part of the drawing process. So mistakes happen, and you go back and you see them and you change them. Good luck. Okay, this tutorial will be on drawing eyes in 3/4 view. So just first starting with laying in kind of the basics. I'm going to be drawing from this reference. So doing my eye line here and the side of the head. And laying in the eye. So when you're dealing with 3/4 view, you're seeing all of the shapes, but cut instead of down the center like we would in a profile, cut about right there, or right there. So 1/4 of them is hidden from view. So something like that. We do have part of the eye overlapped by the nose in this view. That can vary. So just getting in some of these basic shapes. We will have about room again for another eye between the two eyes. So with the eyebrow here, this is connecting to that front plane of the nose. And then we'll have that kind of front intro part of the eyebrow. And then the arch, again corresponding with near the end of the eye. And then curving around. And I'm cutting off there at the end of the page, but you would have an angle in there. All right, so now getting into some more of the specifics. So I've kind of laid in some basic shapes. I'm going to also draw in here this space around the eye, this shadow. All right, now getting into this opening of the white of the eye, I'm going to start with my tear duct. And here I will have, again, this sort of cutting off kind of effect. And I'm laying in the lower lid as well. And I'm also making room for this rim of the lower lid in there. And then using my pencil, I'm erasing out to give that some room. And in this case, I have the eye looking to the side. I'm going to keep it again so that this part of the iris is overlapped. And I'll have this sitting on here. I am looking down a little bit into the camera in this photograph, but I'm going to have my eye more level in how I'm drawing it. All right, then I'm going to come over here, and again, I'm going to put in the white of the eye, if you will. I'm going to go ahead and put in that lash line right away, so that sort of double line. Making that a little bit thinner as it comes toward the nose. And I will make sure too that I put that in over here as well, so making a little bit of room for that. I'm going to test out how large this is. All right, this was looking a little bit too small, so I'm going to make that a little bit larger. I have noticed I've drawn this reference a few times before, and I have noticed that this eye toward the back is a little bit smaller, but I don't want to necessarily exaggerate that because it does make the perspective a little bit extreme. So I'm going to actually compensate for that perspective in the photograph and keep them a little more even. All right, notice this sort of overlapping that happens here with the skin of the eyelid. And notice how this is curving around. It's a little bit hard to see because of the eyelash. All right, and then again, I am going to get that lower rim of the eyelid in there, and I am evening these out in size a little bit. Okay. And laying in, now it should be getting narrower as it moves toward the nose. So if we kept going, we would see the tear duct there, but we don't see that because the nose is overlapping. All right, so then putting in that iris, and again, it's going to come right up and maybe be overlapped a little bit by the nose in this view. Putting in the pupil. Putting in a highlight on both sides. I've got the eyelashes in there, so narrow toward the nose, getting thicker. All right, and now laying in that shape of the eyelid or the eyebrow, and notice how that wraps around the face there. All right, now I'm going to get rid of some of the underdrawing. All right, so I'll notice I'm going to have some shadowing in here. So we'll have that. We'll definitely have a large area of shadow in here. And shadow here. This is the side plane of the nose. All right, we'll have shadow in here as well and around here. All right, I'm just going to, instead of trying to sketch all of those out, I'm going to go ahead and simply start shading in some of these areas. All right, so I'm going to go in now with a darker shading pencil. Okay, starting with the pupils and the iris. And the eyelid will again overlap the iris, so you may see it a little darker towards the top. I'm going to go around that highlight. All right, so we can shade in the eyelashes as well. And I'm going to, again, to get these to match the other side, I'm going to bring this up just a little bit. So I'm just comparing my drawing to my photo. I'm looking at one eye, comparing the size and the shape to the other, and just making adjustments as needed. Okay. All right, so I'm going to keep going with this eye for a little bit. So notice I'm adjusting that line a little bit in here as I've adjusted the shape of the eye. All right, so I'm going to shade up from the lid of the eye here. I'm just making this eye a little bit wider, continuing to adjust until it looks right to me. Okay, so shading up from this eyelid, notice I have this larger part of this shadow here. Again, we have this skin kind of falling over the eyelid a little bit. So we can shade up from that. And over here toward the side, we will shade out. So we have this area of shadow in here. And we would have that angle that would happen toward there. So if you run out of room, you can either redraw earlier in the process or just let it go right off the page. I have this shadow coming around here, and this is going to go right up to the edge of where this rim of the eyelid is catching some light. So the shadow comes just below that rim and gets lighter here as it connects. All right, another darker area of this is going to be over here. So getting a bit lighter as it moves over to this plane. And I don't want to have this as a hard edge. So if you have this as a very hard edged line, you might erase this first. Again, we don't want that as a hard edge. And you can shade against that line, if you will, to help make sure that's a soft edge. This is where this plane begins to turn here. So the side plane of the nose comes into this area beneath the eye, defined by the opening of the that eye socket. All right. And we have this darker area right in here. All right, I'm going to start shading in now with some of these lighter shadows. So with a slightly lighter pencil, shading in underneath and around that edge of the lid at the tear duct, making this line there, and then shading into the white of the eye, shading down from the eyelid, and making sure there's some shading out here in the white of the eye too. All right, continuing to shade here underneath the eyelid. And again, if you have a line here, you want to make sure that we don't have a hard edge. I might use this a little bit for some texture in the skin, but we don't want to have a hard edge on the shadow. I'm going to extend some of that light shading underneath here. And I'm going to switch pencils to include a 2B as well, so that this will blend a little more. All right, I'm going to continue shading along this edge of the nose. and into this eye socket. So we sort of have these two shadows, one here and one here. And then it gets a little bit lighter and then darker. So we've got this area here is the side plane of the nose. Using some controlled hatching and cross hatching there. And switching to a slightly darker pencil. And again, these slightly darker pencils will blend more easily. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lay in the shape of the eyebrow on this side. So I'm erasing this so it doesn't have a hard edge around it. And then as I shade this in, I'm going to immediately move in the direction of the hair. So turning more and more over as I get to this area here that is that arch of the brow, and then turning all the way over. And notice this isn't too close to the end of the eye there. That's going to come right off the page, and where it ended, it would be well over here. So again, you need that space, you need that angle there. And then on top of that, I can begin to add some texture. All right, then I'll do more of that in a little bit. Before I come back in and add texture, I'm going to shade this side of the eye. So again, pupil, iris. So with that shadow coming down from the eyelid, going around the highlight. And I may see just a little bit of that side edge of the iris before it disappears behind the side of the nose. And filling in this lash area lightly, gets narrow as it moves toward the nose. And so just doing my best to kind of keep these even. I don't want to make one too much smaller than the other. So continuing to adjust as I need. So I'm making this one a little smaller as I think it's gotten a little bit too big. And I can bring this one down a little bit to compensate. So just trying to continually revise. Also going to make that a little bit higher up there as well. All right, shading in now from this top of the eyelid and from behind the edge of the nose. Again, you'll see that slightly overlapping here of that skin kind of falling down and forward. And continuing that light shading that comes right up to and kind of into the eyebrow. So I'm turning this, careful not to smudge my work. And filling in the eyebrow with those lines following the direction of the hair. So going this way and then turning over more as we follow that arch of the brow. And I'm going to narrow that out a little bit just to follow what I see. So that would just depend on the person you're drawing. All right, let's see. So getting in a little bit more of these lighter areas. I'm going to make sure here that I have that rim of the eyelid. So notice this wraps around. So I want to make sure that I'm really drawing that in. So this comes down and behind, and you can see this coming in front as it wraps around, and then disappearing up into here as it comes to the tear duct. All right, so getting in some of these subtler shadows in here. So we'll go behind the nose. And wanting to make sure we have that edge of the nose just right. So kind of almost a straight down line here. And then coming out. So again, continuing to revise as you continue to look. All right, so defining this edge of the face out here, we can actually use some of the negative space and shade in. And I'm looking to see where this cheekbone pops out, so measuring that a bit. And for contrast, I can let this lighten up here as we come to the eyelashes so that we can still see those, or we can even draw the eyelashes with our eraser to have them lighter. So leaving a little bit of white at the edge where we need contrast. All right, so filling in a few more of these medium or light shadows, I want to make sure this white of the eye has shadow falling across it and coming up here from both the upper and lower lid. I want to make sure that this area in here does catch a little bit of light. In fact, I think a little more there, and then more coming from here. And we have also a shadow coming from here. And this creates this kind of curving area in here. So lightly defining that opening of the eye socket in this area. We also are going to have shadow falling on the eyelids themselves. So here, and then leaving a little bit of a highlight here in the center, but a little bit of shadow up here and there. Over here, going to add that as well. So coming in here, having shadow, getting a little bit lighter in this space right here around the tear duct. Right, and then coming here again at the top edge of the lid, near the eyelashes, but leaving that highlight in the center. All right, so we'll do a little bit of blending and then add some texture in. So in this area, I'm going to have a soft edge. And in fact, I'm going to add a little bit more shadow here. And if this part is in your drawing, up here as well. Coming between the brows a bit. And I'm also going to add a little bit of shading at the edge of the nose here. So being careful not to have the outline pop out from that shading I'm adding. A lot of soft areas around here. All right, and then making sure that this tip of your blending tool is small, where you need to do these more precise areas. I'm going to just redraw this a little bit. Not quite satisfied with the shape here. I'm going to bring that in a little bit. Make that essentially just a little bit shorter. So making sure here to leave that area a little bit lighter as it comes under and underneath the lashes. And we'll redefine that a little bit more as we come back and do some texture. Over here, I'm about to shade. I'm going to just get rid of some of that underdrawing there. So notice I'm doing this very carefully. I'm thinking about these separate forms, thinking about what's overlapping what. So this nose form overlapping the eye socket. Blending where I want softer edges, but not where I want to keep the hard edge. So the inside of the nose has that softer edge, but this side, the outside, has the harder edge. And using my pencil and my eraser alike to bring that out. So, and to create that contrast, I can make that a little bit lighter on that side. So shading in here more at the edge and blending. And again, I can use my eraser to add contrast and define that edge. And even where we have this eyebrow, we can use the eraser to have that define how the hairs catch at the edge. Making sure with my dark pencil that we don't end up with an outline here, but that this area smoothly transitions into this shadowy area in the background. All right, so we are almost there. Again, we're in that kind of revising period. So I'm noticing the pupils a little bit off, so I'm going to adjust them. All right, so defined this area a little bit in here. So we have this light and then a little bit of dark there. So that's wrapping around. All right, now we're going to go ahead and do just a bit more blending before we add the final texture. And I can soften up and lighten up some of these areas in here. All right, so starting with the eyebrows, adding individual hairs. So again, noticing and observing closely the direction of the hairs as they turn. And we may see kind of another layer up here. And again, we want to stay away from having a really hard edge. Over here, again, following the direction. And not making it too neat or perfect, and that is going to, again, wrap around the side of the face there. And to make that pop, using some eraser on that side. While I'm at that, some of this eyelash is going to stick out over here, so I can use my eraser too to define some of the lashes out here and shade around them. All right, so going in now to the lashes. So those are coming down and out, and we want to be very subtle with them so that they aren't over exaggerated. And over here, I'm going to start from here. And that same idea of just a little down and up. All right, and then I will continue adding some texture. So I see these areas of the skin texture in here. And areas where this shadow gets even darker. So darkening up this area here where it curves into that front plane of the nose. So here defining with a little bit of hatching how this starts to curve here. So there's a transition there. Continuing to add details here in the eye area as well. Okay, just continuing to edit this. One of the things I'm noticing is this bottom part is a little too long as my photo reference actually cuts out. This would be where the nose would start, but since we want to keep this focused on the eyes, I'll actually just erase around here so that we are not having to make something up that's outside of our reference photo. All right, and just continuing to add texture and some firmness to things and some more contrast. So here I'm pulling out some highlights and also doing it with, well, adding a little bit of texture. So by using kind of a hatching approach with the eraser. In here, I can use the direction of my mark making to help establish this plane and how it's turning this way and then this way. Can create a little bit of a subtle curve here where that change occurs. And here it is curving again into the cheek. So I'm just trying to create that change as well with this shadow here. So kind of a triangle forming here with kind of a lighter area in the middle. So just pulling out some highlights, creating a little bit, trying to create a little bit of the texture in here. So blending in some areas, but in other areas, trying to use my mark making to emulate some of the texture of the skin. Using a little bit of reflected light here to create some contrast. Here, trying to get this, to create this sense of a curve here rather than a line. So I'm looking at this and wanting to create a little bit more of a curve here. I think I want my curve to go this direction based on my perspective. I do want to have that highlight still, however. So using my marks. to try to create that. I also want it to be a little bit lighter on this side. So going back and forth between eraser, pencil, blending tool. To get more of a sense of the edge of a form rather than a line. I'm going to use a little bit of my dirty blending tool to add a little bit more of a really subtle shadow here. Not really a shadow, but just very light tone to kind of push this side of the face back a little bit in space, even though it is getting hit by light. Don't want it to pop forward more than this side. Again, noticing and using some really subtle texture lines there in the skin. I can go ahead, I think I will put in very, very lightly some of these lash lines as that level of detail will add a little to the piece, and also there is it's corresponding with a plane change that I wasn't quite getting with just the shadow. So notice I'm putting these in really, really lightly, really light touch on these. So again, trying to get that full range of value. Noticing where I want darker lines, where I want lighter lines, where I want sharp edges. So just trying to get the right balance here. Love to get a little bit of highlight on these, so I'm trying to pull them out with the eraser and then shade around them, the lashes here. So continuing to add contrast. And again, remembering that this eyebrow there wraps around the side of the head. You can actually see that popping out from the skin. Okay. Here we go. Okay. Again, adding a little more contrast in some areas. Just looking, observing, and trying to get an increasing amount of detail as I go. Got to sit back and look and see how it's looking as I do that. So if I go overboard with something, I'm just noticing the effect and going back in and erasing. So again, trying to notice just the smallest details in these planes. The smallest details in shadow and the texture. Here we've got another plane change as this wraps around. So just trying to capture that. Again, noticing that edge kind of sticking out. So I'm going to go in there and connect that. Lifting that for myself to see. Back and just giving a little more definition to the form there. Again, using the eraser as a drawing tool. Really zooming in on every detail here. Come back in here and add texture, not only with my pencil, but with my eraser. Okay, feeling pretty satisfied with those revisions now. And who knows, I'd probably come back to this another day and maybe do even more revisions. When it comes to revising, it definitely helps to take a step away and then come back to notice more things. Put the highlight up there. So I actually did, you may have noticed a little glitch in the video. I did actually stop and then come back with this. I had to step away for some other things, to teach a class or two. And in doing that, although I would have liked to finish the video in one shot, that does actually help and did actually help with these revisions. So as you can see, still making revisions here. Ooh. There we go, I'm just trying to get that to focus. And just coming back in here with a totally clean blending tool. All right. Here, a little more blending so this background part doesn't distract. Okay, well, part of me feels like I could go on and on and on with this, so I will call it quits for now.